Hi, thanks for joining me. Mindy Mandell here. So I'm going on with the series of videos on Proclus's Elements of Theology, and I decided that for this video, propositions 44 through 49 really fit nicely together, so I'm going to cover all of these today. And as I've been doing throughout this series, I am using the E.R. Dodds translation. For those of you who don't have the text, there is a PDF link in the description box. So I'm going to start today with Proposition 44, and this one reads, all that is capable in its activity of reversion upon itself is also reverted upon itself in respect of its existence. What Proclus is really doing here is he is setting up that existence is prior to activity, that something must exist before it can act. And he's doing this because those terms that are in the divine realm, the divine intellect, for example, have both an eternal existence and an eternal activity. They're not moving. We call intellect the unmoved mover. It's what causes soul to be a mover, the first self-moved. This is important because its activity then is eternal, whereas soul is unique in that it has an eternal existence. It is self-constituted in its existence, but its activity is in time. And so he's setting that up here. And soon he's going to be going into propositions dealing with time. And so this is setting that up. So here's how it reads. For if, being capable of reversion upon itself in its activity, it were not reversive in its activity would be superior to its existence, the former being reversive, the latter not, inasmuch as what belongs to itself is superior to that which belongs wholly to another, and what conserves itself is more complete than that which is conserved wholly by another. That was Proposition 9, the one about self-sufficiency. If, then, anything is capable of reversion upon itself in respect of the activity which proceeds from its existence, then its existence is likewise reversive, so that it not only has an activity directed upon itself, but it also belongs to itself and is by itself contained and perfected. And of course, whatever is able to revert on itself is self-constituted. That was Proposition 43. So now that Proclus has set this up, he is ready to show that the self-constituted is eternal. And he does this in two propositions, and you can see them both on the screen here. Proposition 45 is setting up that the self-constituted has no starting point, and Proposition 46 is setting up that the self-constituted has no end point. And so when you put that together, you see it has no beginning and no end, therefore it is eternal. So we'll start with Proposition 45. All that is self-constituted is without temporal origin. For if it have an origin, as originated, it will be in itself incomplete, and it will need the perfective operation of another. Whereas, as self-produced, it is complete, it is self-sufficient, it creates its own good. For all that has an origin is perfected by another, which brings into being that which as yet is not, since coming to be is a process leading from incompleteness to the opposite completeness. Okay, so think about our bodies. They have a cause outside of themselves, and they're not self-generating. We need the soul to give us life, and our soul can also heal the body. And we need medicine, we need the medical arts also to help heal the body. So and we need food to come in and give us nourishment. So the body is not self-sufficient. But whatever produces itself is perpetually complete, being perpetually conjoined with, or rather immanent in, its cause, which is the principle that perfects its being. So, as self generative, the self constituted is complete and it provides its own good. To have an origin would mean being incomplete or needing another to perfect it. Now, I want to pull out the last sentence here because this idea of being perpetually conjoined with its cause, immanent in its cause, is really stressing here. It's highlighting that these three moments, and often we'll call these remaining, proceeding, and reverting as moments. But these three moments are not actually separate. They're not separate moments. So moment is a temporal word that we often use, but it doesn't actually mean that they are different times. They're existing together. This is a whole. It is a kind of a one. It's a unity. But because our discursive thoughts don't really capture this unity in all of its complexities without breaking it up into parts, we have to do that for our own benefit. So for our study, we talk about it this way, but we have to bring it together. And that's why the study of metaphysics is really a meditation. It's a contemplation, an extended contemplation, because we have to keep turning these ideas inward and try to see them as a whole rather than keeping them in separate parts. Okay, well, now that Proclus has established that the self-constituted has no start point, he can complete the idea of it being eternal by showing that it has no end point. And that's proposition 46. All that is self-constituted is imperishable. For if it be destined to perish, it will then desert itself and be severed from itself. But this is impossible. For being one, it is at once cause and effect. So there again is the idea of that triad actually being one. It's not truly a triad. That's only for our benefit that we think about it that way. It's one. It's at once cause and effect. Now whatever perishes is in perishing severed from its cause. For each thing is held together and conserved so long as it is linked with a principle which contains and conserves it. But the self-constituted, being its own cause, never deserts its cause, since it never deserts itself. Therefore, all that is self-constituted is imperishable. Now I want to focus on this sentence here. Each thing is held together and conserved so long as it is linked with a principle which contains and conserves it. Think of bodies, for example, human bodies, animal bodies, insect bodies, whatever. As long as the body is linked with the principle soul, it is conserved. But when the soul leaves the body, then the body experiences death and it decomposes. In contrast, the self-constituted, such as the soul, never deserts itself because it contains its own cause. And so you can see this as an argument against the death or destruction of the soul. Okay, now that Proclus has made clear that the self-constituted is eternal, he wants to also make clear that it is without parts and it is simple. Now again, I think this has already been implied, but he wants to nail it down. And so here's how he's going to do it. So he's got two paragraphs here. The first one is going to show that it is without parts. The second paragraph, that it is simple. So first, without parts. For if, being self-constituted, it yet have parts, it will constitute itself as a divisible principle, and it will be reverted upon itself in its entirety, so that every part will be immanent in every other, which is impossible. The self-constituted is therefore without parts. This idea was actually captured all the way back in Proposition 15, although this is before he introduced the term self-constituted. Proposition 15 reads that all that is capable of reverting upon itself is incorporeal. And in the process of showing this proof, he told us that the whole of a divisible substance cannot be conjoined with the whole of itself, because of the separation of its parts, which occupy different positions in space. And therefore it must be incorporeal and without parts. And of course, that which reverts on itself, we now are calling self-constituted. And so going back to Proposition 47, the conclusion of that first paragraph is that the self-constituted is therefore without parts. And if it is without parts, it must be simple, and so that is the focus of the second paragraph. He says, again, it is simple. For if it be composite, there will be a worse and a better part in it, and the better will be derived from the worse as well as the worse from the better, since it proceeds from itself as a whole from a whole. So it's going in a circle, right? It's also reverting on itself. So the better goes down to the worse, and the worse goes back to the better. So both ways. Further, it will not be self-sufficient, since it will need its own elements, out of which it is composed. Therefore, all that is self-constituted is simple. And this again is highlighting that the three moments of the triad are distinctions that we make without any actual divisions being there. So now that Proclus has introduced the idea that the self-constituted is eternal, he wants to tie it together with the idea of it also being simple. So he gave us those two pieces, and now he's going to put them together. So Proposition 48. All that is not perpetual, and the Greek is actually eternal. All that is not perpetual or eternal either is composite or it has its subsistence in another. For either it is dissoluble into elements, and if so, it is necessarily composite of those elements. Think of a body, for example. Or else it needs a substrate, and it passes into non-existence by abandoning that substrate. Again, think of things in the physical world. If it were simple and it existed in itself, i.e. self-constituted, it would be subject neither to dissolution nor to dispersion. And so now that Proclus has established that the self-constituted is not among those things that are not perpetual, he can now say that the self-constituted is perpetual or eternal. For anything which is not perpetual must be so in one of two ways, either as being composite or as existing in another, and that's what we just looked at. But the self-constituted is simple, not composite. Proposition 47, and it exists in itself, not in another. That started the discussion of the self-constituted, Proposition 41. So the self-constituted is therefore perpetual. What Proclus is doing here is setting up the introduction of time into these propositions, and that's the next set of propositions coming up, so that he will be able to contrast that which is beyond time with that which is in time. So I hope you will join me in my next video as we look from Proposition 50, where he introduces time. If you do have any questions or comments, please leave those below. And if you found this helpful, I would appreciate you hitting the like button. Also, if you don't already subscribe, please do so. You will get notifications then of my next videos. Thank you very much.